Israeli hostage families released footage of female soldiers captured on the 7th of October. And the reason why they released that footage was to put pressure on the Israeli government. However, that footage was used, and it was already like footage that had been out before. It had circulated before and debunked before certain aspects of it. But immediately, Americans took that footage and were like, see, they want to do rapes. They're saying they want to do rapes. And it's always so wild when people say this, because they just suspect that not a single person will speak Arabic, or rather, not a single person will ask a person who can speak Arabic. Yeah, the Israeli Ministry of Foreign Affairs released the footage with the fake translation, which is crazy. Let me tell you something. That in and of itself is literally, it's over. You do that, it's over. You should be universally never trusted ever again. It's also subtly designed to make you look like you're either supporting or otherwise denying the events they're alleging if you attempt to refute or correct them. It's like, wow, so you're saying these women weren't raped? Yeah, it's insane. And it does not make any sense to me whatsoever. I don't understand how like American outlets just run with it. Sickening new video shows Hamas line up female soldiers on October 7th. Here are the girls who can get pregnant. And it's like, bro, what is happening? Like, do you think that we are living in colonial times? Do you think you can just be like, the angry black man is tribal and just write it on the paper of record, and then because at that point no one thinks that black people are human beings, I guess, that like no one will question it? This is 2024. There are people who speak Arabic online. There are people who can like watch the footage and go, what the are you saying? I just don't understand it. I do not understand it at all. It's just pure racism, right? It has to be. It's just like the idea that you think you can get away with like releasing this and just expecting no one to question it is just because like, well, technically if someone speaks Arabic, they are also a terrorist. Like the audience that you're going after is basically people who firmly believe that like if someone speaks Arabic, then they're a threat. Like the people that you're trying to convince here are going to be people that like hear Arabic and go, oh, they're anyway. So this just like reaffirms their suspicions, and then they're not going to go and fact check it. They're not going to go and like ask someone who does speak Arabic, because anyone who speaks Arabic is a terrorist. So obviously like it's, you know, perfectly crafted in the most laughable way possible. If it wasn't so damning and so insane, and the situation that they were like, I guess, trying to manipulate in this circumstance wasn't already like pretty awful. You know what I mean? Daily Mail Online. You're so beautiful. The girls who can get pregnant. Horrifying new footage shows Hamas fanatics taunt young Israeli women with the threat of rape, making them have their children as the hostages. One still in her Snoopy pajamas, plead to be freed. Again, this is over. The mass rape is done. The Israeli regime is honest in their desperation to cover up their APPs, ICC charges, and recognition of Palestine, decided to abandon all pretense and thereby fully expose what a hoax it is. Now, the thing is, the reason why the hostage families actually resurfaced the footage was so that they could literally increase the pressure. They wanted to increase the pressure on the government to do a ceasefire. The way that the hostage families have, you know, used the posters of the hostages in Israel, and the way that is perceived by the broader Israeli population is very different over there in comparison to over here. Over here, we use the hostage posters to be like, see, that's why we're going to murder all of them. That's why we're going to murder all of them. Meanwhile, if you're doing that in Tel Aviv, you're doing that to be like, stop murdering the hostages. This is something that, you know, a lot of people refuse to comprehend in the Western world. This does not mean that the family of the hostages are actually, you know, anti-Zionists or whatever. Of course they're not. But even within the confines of Zionism, there are still people who want a ceasefire for obvious reasons. Like there are a lot of people that hate the war cabinet because they're not going hard enough, for example. You know what I mean? There are a lot of people who hate the war cabinet because they're not doing a ceasefire. And there are still people in Israel that are looking at that footage and going, this is why we fight. This is why we fight. This is why we fight. Now, the problem is, in the Western world, no one looks at that footage, on the Zionist side at least. In the Western world, no one looks at that footage and goes, yeah, that's why they need to do a ceasefire. They look at that footage to go, no, that's why we need to keep pummeling Gaza. Meanwhile, the hostage families are releasing the footage specifically to be like, hey, what the are you doing? You know, these are our family members that are stuck in Gaza and you're blowing them up. It did correspond to an AP News debunking that just came out. And Israel does have a really good eye for this sort of thing. Whenever they see some naysayers in Western media, they immediately hit them with like a, well, remember October 7 line? And they just like resurface that to be like, hey, remember how bad it was? Okay. Which still does not allow Israel. It does not give Israel the right to do a million October 7s all the time, right? And this is the other side of the Israeli discourse. It is not so clear to me what in the observational video caused such a public reaction. We've seen much, much worse. I answer here broadly to everyone. Dear brothers, how can you even imagine that I am indifferent to the fate of the kidnapped? I risked my life for many months on missions in Gaza to try to get them back. I saw the horrors of Hamas with my eyes and felt them with my hands in the days after the massacre. My question was honest. I was really just trying to understand. There are difficult documents of abductees who are still alive, which were published in the past and did not receive a similar distribution and public reaction, and I wanted to understand what happened. Any other reading of my words is forcefully looking for a fight, which is definitely a shame. I think the reason why this like invokes a lot of reaction, because this round of footage, but this is footage that is not like new. This has been out before, I'm pretty sure. If I'm not mistaken, I remember them trying to do the fake caption, they want to rape our women before. Like, I'm pretty sure they tried to do that before and were roundly condemned and criticized for trying to do that. But because it was like very close to October 7 at the time, there was a lot more momentum in favor of Israel. Israel had a lot more, I guess, social and political capital to expend at that point because people were just finding out about it. Washington Post also has been lying and saying that sabaya has sexual connotations. The Arabic word sabaya does not have sexual connotations. Is playing on racist and Orientalist shows about Arabs and Muslims. Relying on the fabricated idea of translation of the word isn't journalism. And that is the educated version of this. Like, that is the educated, laundered narrative. So Eunice Tarawi responds, you're stooping so low as to sexualize your own female soldiers and using them as propaganda material. The first phrase, get pregnant, is fabricated by the author. He says, here are the captured women, using the Arabic word sabaya, the plural form of sabiya, which means captured women. These are not civilians like other hostages. They are active on-duty soldiers captured from a military base, Nahal Oz military observation post. Hamas men said, those are the ones who have been killing our brothers, referring to the extrajudicial killings during the March of Return. The translation claims, these are the Zionists, but he actually said, here are the cowards, Hay al-Hamal. Israel edited the video, adding noise to obscure the original audio. What was audible as "no beautiful" was mistranslated as "you are so beautiful" to imply Hamas was complimenting the female soldiers. Another mistranslation occurred when a Hamas man said "talle," which means get her up onto the vehicle. The pervert author said "without her." And it's nutty, dude. Two things always happen. Whenever the Western world turns around and says like, oh yeah, Associated Press debunked how the two debunked accounts of sexual violence on October 7 fueled a dispute over the Israel-Hamas war. They'll do this article, Israel will retaliate and be like, no, they're actually rapists. And like they have to come up with like an October 7 thing to recycle again. On the more nefarious side of things, they will then further punish the Palestinian population. And that's the other side of the story. Because on the one hand, they are going crazy. They're going nutty mode over the disturbing new video released to hostages in Gaza. On the other hand, however, they're also simultaneously increasing the pressure upon the Palestinian population. What are they doing? Oh, that's right. They're recycling funds taken from border communities inside of Israel and putting them directly into settlement efforts in the West Bank, which is, of course, very frustrating for a lot of people. They're doing that right now. Why are they doing that? The timing of that is very suspicious. It's probably because every single time anyone ever says, Israel, what you're doing is wrong, they literally double down on the cruelty towards the Palestinian population. Whether it's in the West Bank or whether it's in Gaza, it doesn't matter. They only have one note.
Hamas has released a trove of October 7th propaganda videos. The family said they were given this edited version from the military that had removed more disturbing scenes.
Why did your family want to release this video to the public?
Because people are forgetting. We have the feeling that it's becoming normal.
Anger is only growing at Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Many Israelis accuse him of blocking a hostage deal in order to prolong the war in Gaza, allegations he denies.
Do you think your prime minister is doing enough?
I came across a video from October 7 where a group of festival attendees were huddled into a large shower stall and Hamas threw grenades in the room. I really don't know how we resolved this issue. There's horrifying footage from October 7. Like, I've seen them too. Like, the Hamas militants literally opening fire like they're doing mass shootings at porta potties and like that. A lot of people personally think that like the way that Palestinian resistance conducted themselves has to be perfect or was perfect. Like they have this belief that like, no, Palestinians are these like mythical beings. Like, no, your brain is broken by TV. In the real world, although one side is objectively worse than the other, no one is a perfect victim. And the Palestinian resistance is, of course, not going to be perfect in the way that they resist against the apartheid state, which is precisely the reason why we look at the overarching moral failure here. If one state is a nuclear state and heavily militarized and getting all of the armaments from the Western world and all the legal political cover to be able to maintain an apartheid, and the other is an ascetic resistance group pieced together by, orphaned people by the apartheid regime, I'm going to be on the side of resisting against the apartheid because morally speaking, I think it's unconscionable to do that to people. And the reality of the matter is that those people who have been over in incredibly dramatic, unimaginable ways, when they lash out, when they conduct any kind of military incursion into Israel proper, when they do horrifying things to the Israeli civilian population that doesn't deserve it, mind you, in what I would absolutely consider an act of terror, that still does not change the dynamic for me, even a little bit. There is a lot more than October 7 for the Palestinian resistance groups, for Hamas or Al-Qassam or any number of these brigades. There's a lot more than October 7 for them to even come close to the harm that Israel conducts on a daily basis when they're not actually having a military siege, when they're not actually doing an ethnic cleansing campaign. This is something that a lot of people don't understand. Fanon said, decolonialization is always marked by violence, a violence that has been produced by colonizers and experienced by colonized subjects in their everyday lives. The same violence accumulated by the natives has to be claimed and launched back to the colonizers. I'm a firm believer that the standard for violence is set by always the occupying force, okay? And Israel, as the occupying entity here, has set the standard of violence and has increased it over the years. So when that increases on the Israeli front, of course, the resistance side is also going to match the intensity to the best of their ability. But once again, when you look at like a Palestinian militant knowingly throwing a grenade into a crowd of civilians at a rave, at a techno rave in the middle of the desert, right next to a concentration camp, mind you, but still, right? You go, that's unconscionable. That's so crazy. But we, in the Western world especially, have no way to contextualize, to understand the machine of death that Israel has created in the Gaza Strip. Because you think of how personal that is, right? You see a guy, it looks like it's a dude doing mass shooting and using grenades, right? That's something you can comprehend. That's terrifying. Imagine if that happened to you when you went to a techno concert, if you went to the EDC and they did something like that. Well, you can never understand entire city blocks being wiped out by laser guided munitions, 2,000-pound bombs, killing every family deliberately with AI targeting. Like, that's so beyond the pale for us. And I think that ends up creating a little bit of cover for Israel, because we're conditioned into thinking like blown up city blocks, that's Middle East. They probably had it coming. Who knows? But the personal violence that you see, people actually using weapons to shoot people, that's something that you can comprehend, especially as an American. There's a conflict, there's a history, there are power structures. I don't care who's at fault for October 7. I care about what material systems drive the conflict and who holds the power and what can we do to achieve a just resolution of the conflict. Exactly. This is why I always say, like, analysis does not mean justification. And when I talk about like the actions of October 7, every single person is immediately like, wait a minute, you're not immediately running to talk about the barbaric monsters that are Arab dogs that are operating on antiquated, ancient epigenetic anti-Semitism. That is their biological predetermined destiny. They have to operate this way. They wanted to kill Jews. That's why they did this. No, that's not the reason. You are delusional for thinking that is the reason. There's a very obvious reason for why this is occurring. The reason why they're going nutty mode right now in Western media and also nutty mode in Israel is partially because of the AP coming out with a piece saying like, here are the 2 debunked accounts of sexual violence that went far, and also because like all of these other countries in the Western world are even saying that like, Palestinians have a right to statehood and sovereignty. As it stands, no matter what happens, Israel will inevitably do more Israel. They'll do the one thing that they know what to do: harm Palestinians further. ICJ will rule a ceasefire tomorrow, and they'll go extra crazy. Here it is. Israeli officials believe the ICJ will order a ceasefire tomorrow and are fearful of resultant repercussions, such as a resolution of the Security Council to put into effect the order, which would force an American veto. ICJ orders are binding on the parties concerned in the case. Israel has to comply with all measures ordered, past and future. Haaretz came out with the article: Israeli officials fear exposure to sanctions if ICJ orders the halt to Rafah offensive in Friday's ruling. Obviously, Israel doesn't give a about breaking international law. This doesn't mean that like magically Israel is going to stop. You need to understand something here. These things, it just means more pressure. But going back to the situation at hand, this is a Hamas press release regarding the video released by Israel relevant to Nahal Oz base on October 7th. In light of the Zionist occupation's release of the video clip about the captured female soldiers during the events of the Al-Aqsa flood battle on October 7th, we affirmed the following: the video clip being circulated in Hebrew media is a manipulated and partial clip. Its authenticity cannot be confirmed. The circulation of this clip at this time comes as part of the occupation's failed attempt to tarnish the image of our valiant resistance by spreading fabricated narratives that have been proven false by multiple forums and media investigations. The scenes show images of female soldiers at a military site who were captured while working in the Gaza Division Command. They appear in civilian clothing because they were on break, especially since the attack occurred early in the morning on Saturday, October 7th, which is their day off. There is deliberate cutting and editing in the footage with selective images and clips chosen to support the occupation's claims and lines about assaults on the female soldiers. Show deliberate distortions and manipulations in the English translation, fabricating words in the English subtitles that were not spoken by any of the fighters appearing in the video, whether in Arabic or in English. This falsification and manipulation in translation prove the falsity of the Zionist narrative from the outset. The presence of minor bloodstains on or slight injuries on some of the female soldiers is expected in such operations, which can involve jostling. The scenes did not show any physical assault on any of them, but rather depicted dialogue between the fighters and the female soldiers without assault or abuse. The female soldiers were treated according to the ethical standards of our resistance, and there has been no evidence of mistreatment towards the female soldiers in this unit, despite their involvement in harming our people and causing the deaths of hundreds of peaceful protesters on the Gaza borders. All the images and scenes from the recent exchange operation confirm the good treatment they received under the resistance in Gaza, in contrast to what our prisoners face in the occupation's prisons, where they endure oppression, abuse, and killing. You know, people can speak Arabic and fact check this, right? Most people only have time to read headlines, not go over Twitter fact checks, let alone Hamas's own refutations. That's why the media repeatedly does this fabricated atrocity propaganda, and those lies are parroted long after being debunked. The reason for why they do it is because most people don't give a Most people don't see Arabs as human and immediately go after any kind of narrative that reaffirms their position. However, what you have to remember is that there are still always people in the margins. Make no mistake, 50 people in here right now, and I'm being very conservative, that came in here to see what I had to say about this footage, to be like, haha, what will Hasan say now? And then actually saw that the Israeli narrative was completely fabricated. That's why we do what we do. And that is precisely why Israel keeps slowly but surely losing the charitability as they attempt this kind of bottom of the barrel propagandizing.